This is CGTN, China Global Television Network.
South African researchers say Omicron variant may soon push the Delta variant out. What does this mean for the burden of COVID-19? The U.S. and several European countries see record rise in coronavirus infections as some bring back restrictions. And Libya MPs push negotiations over presidential election date to next week. Hello and welcome. You're watching Africa Live. We're coming to live from Nairobi. I'm Hannah Viviers, and here with the very latest in business is Uche.
Thank you, Hannah. And here's a look at what's coming up on Africa Live Bits. A high court in South Africa again stops Shell from conducting a seismic survey along the Wild Coast. And a Kenyan startup develops an affordable way to turn households from charcoal to cleaner gas for cooking. Of course, all that coming up within the program. For now, back to you.
Thank you so much, Uche. We'll see you in a bit. Well, the World Health Organization has warned that the simultaneous circulation of the Omicron and Delta COVID variants are creating a tsunami of cases, which threatens to overwhelm hospitals. The WHO Director General told a news conference today that Omicron is behind the rapid virus spikes, having overtaken the previously dominant Delta variant in several countries. Meanwhile, the United States and many European countries reported record COVID cases, although some experts have urged caution because of Christmas reporting delays. Well, the United States and several European countries are reporting record numbers of COVID infections. France, Greece, Portugal, and England also on new daily highs driven by the spread of the Omicron variant. Many countries have brought back restrictions. However, the UK Prime Minister Boris Johnson is resisting changes in England, saying vaccinations mean current guidance can continue. Naweed Jabarkal has the latest.
We're seeing record high infection rates across much of Europe, and it's no different here in the United Kingdom. In the latest 24-hour period, a record of almost 130,000 cases of COVID-19 were recorded. Prime Minister Boris Johnson has been visiting a vaccination centre and urging people to try and get their third dose of a vaccine or a booster shot at pharmacies like this one. According to him, that's the best bet to try and avoid any serious illness or potentially death as a result of the virus.
I'm sorry to say this, but the overwhelming majority of people who are currently ending up in intensive care in our hospitals are people who are not boosted. I've talked to doctors who say the numbers are running up to 90% of people in intensive care who are not boosted. If you're not vaccinated, you're 8 times more likely to get into hospital altogether. So it's a great thing to do.
The other major talking point here today is around the self-isolation period. On the other side of the Atlantic, they've cut the period to 5 days, and there's growing pressure on Boris Johnson and his ministers to follow suit here. In the US, you can only leave after day 5 if you have no symptoms, and you continue to wear a mask for the following 5. That's something that's not just some scientists want to see here, but potentially the business sector as well, including the hospitality industry, which has been hit hard by the pandemic. One key reason they're pushing for that is because of staff shortages, and that's a concern on the front line of the National Health Service as well. One other major talking point here is around the self-isolation period. Over in the US, they've now cut that down to 5 days, and there's growing pressure on Boris Johnson and his government to follow suit here as well. It's not just from businesses, including the hospitality industry, which have been hit hard by the pandemic, but also by some scientists. The National Health Service is currently facing a huge staff shortage, with almost 20,000 workers, including doctors and nurses and porters, off work or having to self-isolate this month. Here in London, that figure is almost 1 in 4 workers. So far, the government's saying there are no plans to change what their current guidance is. It was changed just last week, cut from 10 days down to 7, and only then you can leave if you've had a negative lateral flow test result on days 6 and 7. The pressure is set to grow, particularly with the National Health Service saying that with record high infection rates here, even if it's not leading to hospitalizations and deaths, it's still leading to increased pressure on their services at a time when traditionally it's a busy time for those on the front line. Naweed Jabakil, CGTN, London.
Meanwhile, in South Africa, research by scientists there suggests that the Omicron variant could displace the Delta variant. The experts say this is because infection with the new variant boosts immunity to the older one. The study, however, only covered a small group of people and has not been peer-reviewed, but it found that people infected with Omicron, especially those vaccinated, developed enhanced immunity to the Delta variant. The Omicron variant was first detected in southern Africa in November. It has since spread worldwide and threatened to overwhelm hospitals in some countries.
So we looked at immunity to Delta in people infected with Omicron, and we found that the immunity is enhanced, which means that people that were infected with Omicron are less likely to be reinfected with Delta. But the opposite is unlikely to be true. So people that were infected with Delta are not necessarily protected from Omicron infection. And this probably tells us that Omicron is going to push Delta out. And that may be important, especially if Omicron gives rise to less severe disease. Well, I mean, you want to build up immunity in any way you can. I mean, vaccination is by far the safest way of doing it. Certainly, previous infection is also one way you build up immunity to the next variant. And that may be what's happening here. I don't suggest people getting infected on purpose. But as far as perhaps the consequences of infection with this variant, perhaps it may make the situation here somewhat better than it was before in terms of pre-existing immunity and waiting for the next variant.
In Tunisia, protests against COVID-19 vaccine mandates and restrictions have been ongoing this week. Public and private facilities in Tunisia are in the process of requiring proof of vaccination, with some establishments already requiring vaccine certificates. While, as we mentioned, there have been demonstrations against such measures, those in support of the restrictions say the government's decision is necessary. With the latest from Tunis, here's Adnan Chouachi.
Tunisia requires digital or paper proof of vaccination to access all essential and non-essential services. Protesters called it an infringement on their freedom of movement to require proof of COVID-19 vaccination to access places like restaurants, malls, movie theaters, or public facilities.
The protest movement brings together people from all social classes and categories, including civil servants and the private sector employees. The vaccine pass is unjust and unacceptable decision. It negatively affects our economic rights. It also limits the freedoms of citizens in Tunisia.
According to the Higher Education Decree, unvaccinated students will not be allowed on any university campus. Many students have joined the protest movement, while many others are opposed to the anti-vaccination rallies.
We completely reject the vaccine pass, which discriminates against tens of thousands of unvaccinated students and isolates them from the society. It is an unconstitutional decree. Studying is our right. We will escalate protests near all universities in Tunisia.
I invite all Tunisian students to get vaccinated. There is nothing to be afraid of. Imposing the proof of vaccination does not take away our freedoms. It rather protects public health and limits the spread of infections.
Ali Nafzi is a retired civil servant. He has resumed a normal life after completing the COVID-19 vaccination protocol and getting his immunity document.
I don't understand why some people reject the vaccination pass and claim that the immunization is not the solution. I got my booster shot without any side effects. The vaccination pass is the solution to save lives.
The opposition movement also rejects mandatory COVID-19 vaccination passports as a condition of employment. all employees who did not get their first and second shots are prevented from work. Many Tunisians who have refused to comply with the vaccine mandate will escalate their protest movement. Meanwhile, hundreds of vaccination centers could not cope with the sudden increase in the number of citizens seeking first, second, or booster shots. Abdel Shawishi, CGTN, Tunis.
In other news making headlines, Sudanese authorities say that at least 38 people lost their lives after a closed gold mine collapsed on Tuesday in West Kordofan province. Several shafts have reportedly collapsed. At least 8 people had been taken to hospitals. Authorities say the site was not functional, but locals began mining after guards left. Troops are now guarding the site to stop unregulated mining. We'll return our attention to Somalia now, where sources say that negotiations are underway in an attempt to diffuse tensions between the country's president and the prime minister. The behind-the-scenes talks come on the back of reports that heavily armed factions were patrolling parts of the capital, Mogadishu, on Tuesday. The presence of those armed factions has raised concern that the political crisis could erupt into violence. Soldiers loyal to Prime Minister Mohamed Hussein Roble took up positions near the presidential palace a day after President Mohamed Abdullahi Farmajo announced the suspension of the prime minister over suspected corruption. Well, let's now take a short break and return. More coming up on Africa Live.
Africa is a continent of diversity, with varied climate and enchanting geography, and a people so distinct, but with a shared enduring spirit. We are at the heart of the continent to bring you the untold stories.
Let's have a look.
We celebrate Africa as it shapes its own destiny.
Abdel Shawishi, Tunis, Cairo,
Juba, Ethiopia, Tanzania.
Africa Live. Find your voice.
Welcome back. You're watching Africa Live. Well, after 2 days of talks, the Libyan parliament were unable to reach an agreement over a new schedule for elections. Parliament decided to delay the negotiations till next week after summoning the Electoral Commission to share its concerns with the MPs. The High National Electoral Commission recommended delaying the December 24th presidential election by 1 month to January the 24th, but the country needs Parliament's approval first. Here's more with CGTN's Adel Amrouhi.
What should have been a session to announce a new date for Libya's elections turned out to be an attempt to reshape the nation's political roadmap. The parliament's session saw significant participation from Western MPs who usually boycott the Eastern-based parliament. After 2 days of talks, they didn't announce any new date for the elections.
Members of Parliament appear to be moving towards planning a new roadmap. This could see the end of the UN's Political Dialogue Forum. They will also discuss the future of the interim government, which the forum produced. They are choosing between reinstating Libya's constitution when it was a kingdom, or to put a recently formed draft constitution for a public referendum.
Parliament listened to police and intelligence reports about the security threats the Poles could face. Libya's parliament speaker says the legislative body agreed to summon the election board next week. MPs want to investigate whether the concerns that forced the board to delay the vote could be addressed immediately, or if it will take longer to get the country ready for a vote.
I believe Libya is on a track towards unity. On an international level, there is progress. Eastern politicians are meeting Turkish officials who support the West. Prominent politicians from Tripoli, like former Interior Minister Fatih Bashaga, went to Benghazi to meet Eastern General Haftar. I think all of this breaks the political ice. No one wants the status quo. We just need a strong government to lead the way to the polls.
The election's delay, however, has upset many Libyans who hoped the transition would have ended by now.
If the election delay for a short period, say 6 months at the most, then it should be fine. They will have time to organize themselves and ensure that the elections are safe and transparent. I won't accept any longer duration.
I'm against any further delay because we had already prepared ourselves that the transition was coming to an end on December 24th. We wanted the people's voice to be heard, we choose our leader and finally have stability. But the delay is disappointing.
Eastern politicians are trying to push for a cabinet reshuffle when the parliament resumes on Tuesday. The UN Libya envoy, however, urged Parliament to focus their talks on the democratic process instead of wasting time discussing the future of the interim government. Libya is back to square one of its political roadmap. From immediate presidential and parliamentary vote to a comprehensive legislative restructuring that could lead to a new constitution, it appears that all options are on the table. And the longer the parliament talks stretch, the less likely Libya could open the polls on January 24, the date the Elections Committee recommended. Adel Mahroui, CGTN, Cairo.
Staying with that story, earlier we spoke with Dr. Mustafa Faturi, a Libyan academic, on the issue. We began by asking him what was behind the jitters about the presidential election.
The idea that there are forces in the political scene in Libya, inside the parliament as well as outside the parliament, who want certain names being banned from running for the presidential elections, despite the fact that some of those names, such as Saif al-Islam Muammar Gaddafi and General Khalifa Haftar, were rejected at first, but the court decided that they are legitimate contestants and they cannot be denied the opportunity to contest the elections. What the parliament has been postponing the debate now until next week, and even the idea of proposing a new date. I mean, the Libyan people are not happy even about January, next year. They will be even more angry if the parliament goes ahead and decides to delay the elections until 6 months later or something. Well, first thing is security. We haven't been having a great deal of security, even in the capital itself. We have seen some, mobilization of armed militias inside the capital over the last 2 weeks, as well as a month ago, and when they attacked the residence of the Presidential Council Chairman, Mr. Mnifi. There have to be some kind of agreement, among the different political actors, domestic as well as international, that the elections must take place and the laws are accepted that govern those elections are accepted by everybody. And then a government that's capable and clean enough from corruption to run such elections. I think this government is not qualified enough, it's not clean enough, it's not trusted enough, does not enjoy the legitimacy it had last March to run and organize the elections in an objective manner. Can the parliament actually solve this problem and have a new government in a few days' time and organize elections as soon as possible? I really doubt that. So the only option is probably to have the Parliamentarian Oversight Committee to continue its work and include oversighting the election itself away from the government. That's the only way out of this mess.
Well, on to some much welcome news for Egypt. The country has recovered a significant amount of stolen artifacts throughout this year. Over 5,000 pieces smuggled out of the country have been returned. The collection includes ancient Egyptian, Coptic, and Jewish antiquities, some of which date back to 2000 BC. With the details is CGTN's Adel Murhi.
With a cultural heritage extending for over 7,000 years, Egypt has buried treasures from the ancient Egyptian time to the Greek, Roman, Coptic and Islamic reigns. This rich inheritance makes the country a goldmine for illicit antiquities traders. Tirelessly running to protect its heritage, Egypt is always in a global chase to bring back smuggled ancient artifacts.
The Egyptian antiquities are like a puzzle. Every piece complements another. Together they form the Egyptian civilization. The Sphinx beard, for instance, is in the British Museum. Another part is in the Egyptian Museum. If we have all the pieces, we could fully restore that statue. Retrieving antiquities is crucial because the importance of the artifact is its placement in its original environment.
2021 has been celebrated to be one of the most successful years in retrieving stolen antiquities. Cairo says it brought back some 5,266 pieces. Considering that only 143 countries have signed the 1970 UNESCO Illicit Trading Convention, the retrieved items this year reflect the magnitude of legal efforts Egypt exerted.
The UNESCO agreement doesn't include any antiquities smuggled before 1970, so these cannot be retrieved. Two conditions must apply to bring back those after 1970. The first is to prove it exited the country illicitly, and the second is to prove ownership. That only happens if a piece is discovered and officially registered. So there is a huge problem because most smuggled pieces are dug out illegally, and almost all the most prominent artifacts were taken from the country before 1970.
The list of items safely brought back home includes 115 pieces from France, 95 from Israel, 36 from Spain, and more, mostly from Western countries. They comprise rare papyrus documents, stone, wooden and bronze statues, masks, and pieces of ancient coffins. 2021 also saw Egypt create awareness about its cultural heritages through events that caught the world's eyes.
I believe 2021 was a turning point for Egypt's efforts to bring the spotlight to its antiquities and create global awareness. The Royal Parade in Cairo and the Sphinx Parade in Luxor managed to attract the world's attention. This will definitely affect the efforts to retrieve more antiquities next year.
Meanwhile, Egyptian authorities are stepping up law enforcement measures to curb smuggling antiquities from the source. This year, at least 813 pieces were confiscated from outbound passengers and shipments at land, sea, and airports. Police has also arrested a prominent Egyptian businessman over accusations of running one of the biggest antiquity smuggling networks in the country. Adel Mahroui, CGTN, Cairo.
Well, on to some health concerns coming out of Senegal. Scientists there are warning of a re-emergence of harmful microalgae on the beaches of the capital, Dakar. First reported in Senegal back in 2006, the microorganisms are feared to cause an illness with symptoms close to those of the flu and COVID-19. Wanda Mungai has the details.
As the world battles the coronavirus pandemic, in the Senegalese capital of Dakar, citizens have one more scare. Recently, scientists reported the emergence of microalgae that causes symptoms similar to flu, and it's been affecting those living by the seaside.
We've encountered this phenomenon in recent years. The toxins emanating from these algae will be taken by the wind to people, making them sick, especially with fever and coughs. Some people will even stay 2 days without working, but it should be pointed out that no case of death linked to these algae has yet been reported. It may exist, but advanced investigations are required.
au niveau des plans d'eau.
The problem we have here is that people do not take care of the sea, which is where we get our fish from. While some people are trying to clean up the edges of the beach, others are polluting it, which doesn't make sense.
The communities around here rely heavily on fishing, and some of them fear the microalgae could have negative effects on their livelihoods. Certain species of microalgae produce toxins which can pose serious health hazards to humans and marine life, but it is not clear yet what causes the toxicity.
This situation has been carrying on here in Senegal for 10 years now, but we've not yet determined the exact cause. But it was during the surfing competition that took place in Dakar that most of the participants reported problems with breathing and fever.
To combat toxic microorganisms, experts like Wallen Diaye are calling for proper waste management and regular cleaning of the beaches. Wanjamungai, CGTN.
Well, I'll be standing by to bring you more in Africa Live, including the very latest coming out of the world of sport. But for now, let's take a look at what's happening in business with Uche.
Thanks, Hannah. And coming up on Africa Live Biz. A high court in South Africa again stops Shell from conducting a seismic survey along the Wild Coast. And a Kenyan startup develops an affordable way to turn households from charcoal to cleaner gas for cooking.
How will your world change today? What happens here? What happens there? Or what you make happen for yourself? If it matters to you, it matters to us too. Your stories are the stories that need to be told. Africa Live. Find your voice.
Africa is the nexus of enterprise, and global business will tell you why it matters.
From the mega investment projects to multi-billion-dollar mergers and acquisitions.
Africa today collects, just in terms of revenues from taxes alone, $545 billion a year. If you take 10% of that and you devote it to the energy sector, problem solved.
All this on Global Business, weekdays at this time on CGTN.
Well, let's start off in South Africa, where a high court has halted Shell's seismic survey along the Wild Coast. This is, of course, the second application made in the same court to stop the company's seismic survey. This comes after a court dismissed the application by activists to stop the survey on the basis that irreparable harm to marine species had not been proved. Now, the applicants include the Amadiba, Dwesa Swebe, Port St. John's, and the K-Mouth communities, which of course are all small-scale fishing communities. In their application, the applicants argue that Shell does not have the necessary environmental authorization in terms of the National Environmental Management Act in order to lawfully undertake seismic exploration activities in the area. And heading to Egypt now, the country's president, Abdel Fattah el-Sisi, has issued a decree stopping the issuance of food ration cards for new families. Now, these ration cards entitle their holders to receive about 35 free or subsidized food items from the government every month. For decades, these food subsidies were meant to help support the poor, but officials say it is no longer functioning as planned. From July 2022 to June 2025, Egypt is forecast to spend an average of $6 billion each year on those food subsidies. Here's Yasser Hakim with the details.
For over 80 years, poor married couples have been receiving food ration cards. They would automatically add their children on the food ration cards and with time, their grandchildren as well, and so forth. Nearly 2/3 of the 102 million population now benefit from it every month. whether they are poor or well off. Egyptian President Abdel Fattah el-Sisi has decided to cut this cycle and prevent issuing new ration cards for family members.
We have to change the culture of population growth. If you want 1, 2 or 6 children without being able to provide for them and to give them good education and more, you have to take a step back. No one who is getting married from now on will receive food ration cards. If you're getting married and yet you're waiting for the country to give you a ration card, it means you're getting married and yet you can't even spend on yourself. This is not right. This has been deep-rooted in our culture. It is only in our country that you will buy things cheaper than its real value, you get services at less cost, and when you have children, the state feeds them. We cannot afford it anymore.
Officials believe that cutting food subsidies for children would automatically reduce the country's high birth rates, a big problem for the developing nation. Though this move could anger millions who have been benefiting from ration cards for decades, experts say it's correcting what's wrong.
Poverty rates in Egypt are about 29.7% down from 32% in 2017. That is about 32 million citizens. The ones who receive subsidized food are over 64 million. So there is a big gap between 64 million who use ration cards and 32 million who are eligible for the ration cards. The decision by the president is to reduce the gap.
According to official statistics, in 2020 the government had spent $10.5 billion on food subsidies, a big portion of the state budget's $80 billion. The new decision will save nearly half this amount, thus freeing funds for other social security programs.
There is the Dignified Life program to develop the rural villages in Egypt from the year 2020 to 2023 and will benefit 58 million people at a cost of $44 billion. This is just one example. There is also the monthly financial income scheme on the Takaful and Karama social program, which costs $1.2 billion and benefits about 3.27 million families. That's about 14 million Egyptians.
The process to only allow ration cards to those who really need it begins in 2022. It is part of a comprehensive restructuring of the social safety net at the North African country to help eradicate poverty and improve living conditions for the low-income earners. Yasser Hakim for CGTN, Cairo.
Well, let's head to Nigeria now. The country's public debt load has become a big talking point in the country as it approaches the $100 billion mark. Now, with debt service taking up well over 60% of available revenues, many now fear the country's debt load may become unsustainable. However, the federal government says the debt is necessary to build the public infrastructure which the country desperately needs. Here's CGTN's Deji Bademosi reporting.
Nigeria plans to spend close to $42 billion next year. But what's got people talking is the budget deficit, which is slightly more than a quarter of the entire budget. At about $15.2 billion, the budget deficit is 3.39% of the country's GDP. And to make up for the deficit, the government will have to borrow to fund the budget.
There's no way you can worship money and talk about policy and talk. People are dying. So they have to borrow money to invest. And then the thing was that we needed an expansionary policy because we went into stagflation. So at the time, the inflation was rising as well as unemployment and output collapsing. This is a different type of recession. So they had to fight it out by pouring money on it and then raising revenue for the household and all kinds of statutory forbearance on the banks and bringing down interest rate. All those measures kicked us out of recession within 1 quarter. So it's a very necessary thing to do.
As at September this year, Nigeria's total debt stood at approximately $93 billion, with additional borrowings expected to fund the 2022 budget. The figure will surely go up.
What is more worrying is that if you look at the analysis, we're borrowing to curb to spend on recurrent expenditure, and that for me is not a good thing. Today, we have excess of 90% debt to revenue ratio, and that is also very worrying. So yes, our debt position is indeed very worrying.
The government says Nigeria's debt challenge is actually a revenue one. While the country's debt to GDP ratio is currently at 35.7%, its debt service to revenue ratio is 70%. It's a clear evidence that the government will need to drive up revenues substantially for the country's debt to be sustainable.
We all have to work, not just federal government, but state governments, to increase our revenue to enhance our debt service obligations. And we also have to make sure that when we're choosing the projects, we're choosing carefully the ones that will enhance business environment so that more revenue yields comes into the treasuries of the country.
Nigeria's infrastructure needs are enormous, and with the help of borrowings, the country is gradually addressing its infrastructure gap. With the help of funding from China, for instance, the country is modernizing its railways, building roads, new aviation terminals, and many others. But many are still worried over the ballooning debt profile of the country. DG Badimosi, CGTN, Lagos, Nigeria.
Now, a widely anticipated travel documentary starring Tanzania's President Samia Suluhu Hassan is set to premiere in April 2022. The documentary shows the head of state taking the audience on an adventure across some of the country's most iconic landscapes. Here's CGTN's Isaac Lucando with more.
It's not often that politicians get to star in films. This coming April, President Samia Suluhu Hassan will come to screens around the world in a travel documentary dubbed The Royal Tour. She is using her time in the spotlight to showcase Tanzania's various tourism, investment, arts and cultural attractions.
The goal is to show the world that Tanzanite gemstones come from Tanzania. We are showing them evidence of where the mines are, the way they are mined, and how we add value until it reaches the end user.
The documentary is part of a series produced by Emmy Award-winning American journalist Peter Greenberg. While the major focus of the series is on tourism, President Hassan is also using the platform to boost foreign investments.
We want to showcase our good governance and our stable political climate in order for investors to come and invest so that we win and they win.
Tanzania is not the only country to get featured in the series. In the past, the show has featured a number of world leaders and their countries, including Rwanda's President Paul Kagame.
Before the COVID-19 pandemic, Tanzania would receive some 1.5 million tourists from around the world every year, earning the country around $2.5 billion. President Hassan is hoping that some screen time will help boost these numbers.
Most members of the public are particularly excited about the documentary's potential impact on the country's tourism.
As a nation, we are getting a tool to transmit to the world what makes us a nation, and to also transmit to a large extent what treasures we hold as a country.
Because when they come, they visit different hotels, they buy different things from different vendors. So it's a positive, it will bring positive impact in our development. So it's a good thing.
Critics argue that the documentary alone may not be enough to change the fortunes of the country. However, President Hassan remains optimistic that her time in the spotlight will ultimately benefit ordinary Tanzanians. Isaac Lucando, CGTN, Dar es Salaam.
Above the reach of magnificent beasts.
Now, for many households across sub-Saharan Africa, biomass fuels such as charcoal are still the primary source of energy. However, charcoal is a major air polluter and driver of deforestation, creating demand for affordable alternatives. Well, one such firm, M-Gas, focuses on the low-income market for low-emission cooking fuels. It deploys gas tanks with smart valves that allow customers to pay for LPG in small increments. Take a look.
When dusk blankets Nairobi and most of rural Kenya, many dinners simmer over charcoal fires. Charcoal is a major polluter and driver of deforestation, but M-Gas may have a solution. Customers say the gas is cleaner, cheaper, and more convenient than traditional fuels like wood or kerosene.
I feel M-Gas serves me better as there is no smoke. Cooks my tea faster than when I used to cook using the stove and kerosene. It would take a really long time. Now, I only pay whatever amount that is available to me for the gas.
It doesn't cost me as much as when I used kerosene or charcoal. Mostly I used the stove and I spent about $1 daily. And even if I bought 5 liters of kerosene, it would only last me for 1 week and it would cost me about $6.
Only 1 week.
This month, MGas received $25 million from UK-based Circle Gas, whose investors include regional telecoms giant Safaricom. The firm says the potential market is huge, citing that around 3 billion people globally use dirty fuel for cooking. This contributes to air pollution that causes an estimated 4 million premature deaths each year, according to the World Health Organization.
The market is massive, so we really want to grow this at scale. We are only here because we want to have a huge impact at scale. So let's see how we go, but if I were a dreamer, and I'm a bit of a dreamer, in a couple of years, some million households in Kenya, some million households in Tanzania, and let's see from where we go from there.
Using charcoal or wood also drives severe deforestation. According to the World Bank, dirty cooking fuels generate about as much greenhouse gases as the aviation industry, about 2% of the global total. For many years, there was little alternative. But the recent explosion of mobile money, more affordable technology to build smart meters, and urbanization have combined to make pay-as-you-go gas competitive. MGas installs the stove, 13-kilogram gas cylinder, and meters collectively worth around $80 in customers' homes for free. Buying the same size tanks outright costs around $22, too expensive for many families. The smart meters on the MGas tanks mean customers can make small payments, even meal by meal, on their mobile phones. It also alerts the company when the gas is about to run out and a new tank is delivered free of charge. The cost of the stove, meters, and delivery is paid through a small premium on the overall price of the gas, so there's no upfront cost, and it takes around 2 years for the cost of the equipment to be paid off. Alexandria Majala for CGTN.
Well, that's all for now on Africa Live Biz, but do stay with us. My colleague Hannah Viviers will be back with more news after the short break.
Africa is ending yet another pivotal year. From moments of uncertainty to moments of triumph, moments of unrest, moments of rapid change in business, climate change, security and diplomacy, and coming back from the break. All these and much more on Events 2021. The greatest journeys, the greatest sights, the greatest adventures.
Here in Panater, this weir allows the locals to walk on water.
We're far more than just TV news. We're your passport to the wonders of Africa.
To bring you stories of struggle, survival, and hope.
So let's explore. CGTN. See the difference.
Well, the move to online sales is proving to be a boon for some artists in Kenya. One such artist has taken to reproducing his paintings in more affordable prints, while also creating tutorials of his work. Victor Senyawa brings us his story.
Hi, Wilkiston. Karibu sana. Fine, thank you.
When you step into Victor Omondi's home,
so let me show you this is the gallery.
You step into a world of color, of dreamy images immortalized on canvas. This visual artist's home is also his workshop and art gallery. It's where magic happens. Kenya's diverse cultures can be seen in arts and crafts, which include wood carvings, ornaments, figurines, and paintings. And a few years ago, Victor quit his job as a graphic designer to join these creators, becoming a full-time artist. Creating hyper-realistic paintings was fulfilling, but he had to figure out how to get his artworks out to the public.
And I thought, let me go try out and sell them in the galleries. But in the galleries, most of them are specific in what they want. Some of them want contemporary art, abstract art, and that's very different from what I do.
So he turned to social media, which introduced him to the world. As the COVID-19 pandemic began all across the world, a number of artists reported increased interest in their artworks. As members of the public moved to working from home, they sought ways to make their spaces more aesthetically pleasing, and hence increased interest in art. He also started to share video tutorials of the process behind the work, helping other artists to hone their skills. But while many potential clients loved the pieces, they would back away when Victor shared the prices. His prices range from about $35 to over $600. So Victor decided to start making prints of his work, selling them for even up to a tenth of the original price. In the month of December especially, tens of pieces have flown off the shelves at a time, some sold beyond Kenya's borders.
Sharing them on social media has really helped to bridge the gap between me and the art collector or buyer, as opposed to traditional ways where we had to rely on established galleries.
Karioke Gishira, one of Victor's clients, notes that buying art can seem like an indulgent habit even when it's not expensive.
So that's the reason why I decided to buy artwork. It's to celebrate Africa, because you have very many beautiful things. I have artworks that maybe cost less than 1,000 shillings. They just cost maybe 900 shillings. I've bought artwork for 400 shillings. So I think it depends with the artist and the type of artwork that you're buying.
Across town, James Agutu admires a painting which Victor delivered recently. For years, he has hunted down beautiful pieces to adorn his walls.
Few art galleries that were there, I had an opportunity of going into one or two. The price of artwork was out of reach for most Kenyans, including myself. But then gradually, I've seen a gradual accessibility to artwork. And the prices today are reasonably well, the artwork are reasonably well priced. And I believe because of also competition.
The Kenyan public has always shown an appreciation for art, and as younger artists take to social media and find avenues to bring down prices, it is becoming more accessible.
If you look at our African history, Africans, we liked art for so long. It will create more opportunities for people to appreciate the art, and again, it's going to create employment.
Bit by bit, with digital tools, artists of the modern age are doing their part to break barriers and sharing the joy of owning beautiful pieces with everyone. Wilkes Anyabwa, CGTN.
Well, here's what's coming up in sport. South Africa's Paralympian Ntando Mhlangu rises to global star status following gold medals in Tokyo.
How would you create your legend? On the fields, on the tracks, in the arenas of Africa. Were you born to be a player? Could this moment be yours? Sports Scene. Find your game.
Africa Live. Find your voice.
Well, the 2020 Tokyo Paralympic Games may be over, but the glory from those games shines on for some athletes, especially those who clinched medals. Among them is South African Ntando Mhlangu, who captured the imagination of his Rainbow Nation when he claimed 2 gold medals at the Games. CGTN CS Duplessis takes a look at what is sure to be an unforgettable year for the young athlete.
In July of 2021, Ntando Mhlangu announced that he was going to add the long jump event to the T61 class 200 meters, where he was considered a serious contender for the gold medal. It was something him and his new long jump coach, Neil Cornelius, were working on behind the scenes of an already busy schedule that included his final year at high school and preparations for his second Paralympics.
You know, someone would say, why are you putting another event when you already have so much pressure? But, you know, I like to, when I do something, I like to go full out. And that was the thing, you know, if we go to Paralympian and we can do 2 events, why not? You know, let's try to push it.
Cornelius, stuck in South Africa and unable to travel to Tokyo with the Afrikaans Science Hoërskool Senior, was texting instructions to Mthlangu's orthotist, Johan Snyders, and watching with bated breath as his protege lined up for his final attempt.
As soon as he stood on the runway and I could see the smile because the TV was showing it live. And I saw that smile just before he started his run-up. I knew, yeah, something big is coming now. I just had no idea it'll be that big.
On his return to South Africa, the double Paralympic gold medal winner was celebrated for his world record of 7.17 meters in the T63 classification long jump and his first place in the T61 200 meters. An incredible feat for someone who only learned to walk on prosthetics 9 years ago.
I was running for the nation, and even on my long jump, I think you know, I gave it my best. And then on the last jump, I was not jumping for myself anymore. I think it was jumping for the nation.
Actions tend to speak louder than words, and what Ntando Mthlangu achieved resonated across South Africa. And instantly he became a beacon of hope for so many.
I think that was the whole idea for myself, you know, going to Tokyo. It was to inspire young ones in South Africa. It was to inspire the people of South Africa. I think anything is possible. You know, we just have to believe in ourselves as a country. And yeah, I really hope that I did bring back Ubuntu in South Africa.
The sky is the limit for the new Paralympic star, who at the age of 19 is a double Paralympic gold medalist, has endorsement requests flooding in through his agent's door, and is regarded by many as the future of the Paralympic movement. Mthlangu's humble approach on and off the track makes him one of the most approachable athletes and an individual that a lot is expected of at this early age of his flourishing career. CS du Plessis, CGTN, Pretoria, South Africa.
In football, Africa's top striker Mohamed Salah has continued to prove he is among the best in the world. The Egyptian forward broke the all-time African goal-scoring record in the English Premier League, eclipsing retired Ivorian great Didier Drogba. Here's CGTN's Adol Marouchi with a review of yet another great year for the Egyptian.
Anfield has been the home for Egypt's Mohamed Salah since 2017. With Liverpool, the inspiring African striker continued to amaze the world of football by breaking more scoring records in 2021. This year, Mo won his first Golden Foot Award. With 110 goals, he's the top scoring African in the history of the English Premier League.
Salah is achieving everything possible. He's already created a legacy. People will always say he's the winner of the Golden Boot. He's been among the top 10 players in the world for 4 consecutive years. He's always looking forward to what's next.
What makes Salah unique is that he is very passionate about breaking football records, to achieve as many personal awards as possible, but at the same time, he's very humble when he achieves it, and very cooperative in the field with his colleagues despite these achievements.
So far, the 29-year-old Egyptian's talent appears to be only growing. Salah became the first Liverpool player to score in 5 consecutive games since 1902. And he's now the first away player in English Premier League history to score a hat-trick at Manchester United's Old Trafford. Yet when it comes to the Egyptian national team, Mo did not hit the same heights this year.
Mohamed Salah gives the national team his best efforts, but he is not Superman. Salah is one player who plays with 10 others alongside him. He has good spirit and gives confidence to the team.
The achievements and records he broke are too many, and now the focus has become on what titles are left for him to win. Fun fact about Mo, he has never scored from a free kick in the English Premier League. His titles include the best player in the Premier League, the best player in the Swiss League, the best player in the Club World Cup, and the best player in Africa. Yet he hasn't won FIFA's The Best or the Ballon d'Or. And they are two titles that must see Mo Salah take the Egyptian national team to new heights. Adel Mahroui, CGTN, Cairo.
Pep Guardiola says that rescheduled matches in an already crowded fixture are making it difficult for all clubs.